Hello, my name is Kris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org. Today I'll be presenting the Law of Freedom Part 5, Karma and Free Will, part of a series of presentations on the Law of Freedom, which is itself part of a series of presentation on natural law, the science of morality. So today is going to be, presentation is going to be like bringing up some issues and some arguments for the importance of free will that sort of dispels a lot of ideas that some people have, beliefs they have about karma. So let's take a look. Karma, so collective negative karma. So this is talking about what we've talked about in part 4 on karma in general. So karma can be positive or negative, and individual or collective. See part 4. For the law of freedom, which deals with aggregate or collective, the aggregate or the collective, and how persistent immoral behavior creates the state of enslavement, the negative karma present is mostly about the collective receiving negative consequences, which I termed aggregate K1, karma type 1 or level 1, receiving negative consequences from injustices. So that's people who are being violated. And this is from a failure to apply consequences, K2, to the violators, which would stop the persistent immorality. So because it's not being stopped, it keeps happening. And then it keeps happening because everyone allows it, and that's the collective negative consequences that we continue to have because we're not putting a stop to it. So basic example is I hit you and you get hurt. It's instant as opposed to delayed. And that's K1, the negative result to another. But then you can hit me back and I get hurt. And that's also instant where I feel that negative. And that's K2, where the negative result is returned. So it's sent out and it's returned. And it's returned in a way that is personal and direct negative karmic consequences. So again, we went over this in part 4. Check that out. We overall decide we are going to have rulers rule us and decide things for us. They control us and decree things that are moral as immoral or immoral as moral. For example, you're not allowed to do X without an injection. We get delayed collective negative consequence, K1, for the action of supporting a system of centralized authority over others. So that's not fun, but we're the ones supporting it. And so at the time, we're voting and everything's fine. But look at what they can do because we support the system of centralized authority over others. Then they're saying, you're not allowed to go here. You're not allowed to do this if you don't do what we say, which was already the case in different ways. But it's just an obvious example from the previous years that more people are aware of because it wasn't as covert as the form of enslavement through government in general that we live under. So the purpose of karma, learn from mistakes. So what purpose does the idea of karma have? What purpose do negative karmic consequences have? Right? You can just think about it. Well, what's the purpose of all this? The negative consequences. Well, you're learning lessons of what not to do. Learn from mistakes via suffering, harm, or chaos. You do something, and if you get a negative result to yourself for doing it, be it automatically or from the response of another free will, then you don't do it again. You could stub your toe, you could start a fist fight, and then when you stub your toe, you get the negative instant causal, directly physical causal interaction of the pain. So you want to avoid that. You start a fist fight, someone hits you back, and and then you get hurt, and you get hurt more, and you don't get what you wanted, whatever that was. So you learn, hey, maybe I shouldn't do that. If you don't get a negative result, then you learn that you can repeat that behavior without consequences because you get no negative for doing it. This process of learning requires memory. Now that's either getting the negative returned to you or getting no negative. Well, you're still going to be learning something that requires memory of what happened. Not having memory of your action and the causal consequence thereof means there is no learning, and you end up repeating things over and over without knowing if they are beneficial or detrimental to yourself or others. History is the passing down of true or false memory to future free wills to learn from, and ideally not have to learn from doing the actions themselves. That is, not doing the mistakes themselves. You learn from the mistakes, or you learn from the good things people do, and you build on top of that. Memory to learn what not to do. There are other ideas posited for how karma works. I don't know if they are true, and I don't think anyone else can know either, as they can't be verified or demonstrated. These are beliefs which have logical issues given other arguments that disfavor their likelihood. Maybe memory persists beyond an individual life, where memories of past lives of humans is accessible to future lives. This ties into the belief of reincarnation. So maybe that's the way it is, maybe it isn't, I don't know. I don't think anyone can show that this is actually verifiably the way things work, but let's take it as an idea. So let's say there's these memories of the past lives, and then you have access to them in a future life. Like now in your life, you have access to past memories. All right, let's say you can do that. But that's not the default way for humans to learn. That's not how we learn. That's not the default memory recall process for humans. That's not something 99.9999999% of humans are even doing. It's not how humanity is going to learn what not to do. Not from those alleged past memories of past lives, however long ago. That's not how humanity is going to causally link the consequences in the present with a wrong behavior in the past. For all intents and purposes, the memories of your life that you can learn from, or the written stories of claims of what others have done in the past that you can learn from, are the ways humanities will learn what not to do. So it could be written, could be audio, could be video. We have that now. In the past they didn't, but now we have other forms of media. But in general, throughout history, it was just the written form or oral form passed on from person to person. So these are stories of claims of what has been done, and we don't know if all these stories actually happened, but someone at some point said it happened. Maybe it did. Anyways, that's another topic for another day. Automatic punishment? Are there laws that automatically punish in some way, maybe after death, or other wills or other consciousness that do so after death? If there are, how can anyone verify this? If there are, none of it is ending slavery. None of it. So this ties into the whole reincarnation, karma, punished for past lives, etc. Is it an automatic process, like a law? Is it other consciousnesses, like somewhat of a demigod or a god consciousness or a will that's making that happen? After you die, you're going to get punished. And you can't verify it. And none of it is ending slavery anyways. The purpose of reciprocal negative consequences or punishment is to learn from mistakes so that change can be created, which requires memory. Those are requirements for change. Without those requirements, which is memory, and having consequences applied, and then being able to learn from those consequences because you have memory of the causal link between what happened and the result in consequences, the desire to change won't happen. Free will is the base requirement to have memory of the negative. memory of slavery. You need free will to have that memory of slavery. You need a certain level of free will. And I've gone into that in part 3 or 2 of the Law of Freedom series. I forget. So free will is the base requirement to have memory of the negative, such as slavery. To learn from the negative and choose differently, to not get the negative and work to get the positive of true freedom instead. The claim that there is a law or process that necessarily brings direct, personal, negative karmic consequences back to you in life, or a part of you that continues beyond your life, is unverifiable. What is verifiable is the optional free will action that can make direct, personal, negative karmic consequences occur. So all these other ideas, hey, maybe that happens, doesn't really make sense to me. I'll go into that a bit more in this presentation. But what we can verify is that if you want things to change, and the way people are going to learn from their mistakes to create that change, and the memories they actually can have is in their life, and that's where direct, personal, negative karmic consequences are brought to them in their life that they're living, so that they can learn not to do those things. Universal blooper ideas. I was trying to find what to call this one, so I came up with this. It's a bit of a silly name. Claiming that reincarnated present life specific conditions like being poor or being violated are wholly or partially determined by a reincarnation's past life actions. So your life now is directly tied to a specific single life in the past, which then could have been tied to a direct specific life in the past that follows through, and that's the buildup of your karma, specifically, or your soul reincarnates, etc., is a bad design in the universe for a system of learning and correcting mistakes. So I've already talked about that. Memory, consequence, learning. You don't have that, because that's not how 99.9999999% of people are having memory of things and are learning, capable of learning from. There is no learning when you have no memory of a past you are being rewarded or punished for having lived. Claiming the universe controls free wills to orchestrate and manipulate others to bring personal, direct, negative karmic consequences as a payback is violating free will choice. Because if the universe is making free wills do something, then they don't actually have free will. So it's not making people get violated because of something their soul did in another past life. Okay? Both of these claims for how the universe functions are nonsensical. That is to say, they're bullshit. And here's a quote from Manuel P. Hall from A Second Look at Karma. Just threw that in here. Karma is not a punishment bestowed by heaven, not a painful work given by deity. Karma is simply the fact that there are rules in the game of life in creation. Right? So you do certain things. I went over this in the Law of Freedom, Part 1 and Part 2. How there's consequences that can be positive or negative given certain choices of behavior. And then you learn from those choices, and then you choose optimal positive benefits as opposed to detrimental ones. Freedom is for free wills. That's the big point of this presentation. The default state of psychological beings that can move their bodies at will, that is animals, is that of freedom, whether they recognize it or not. And this I went into in Part 2 or Part 3. I think it was Part 3, but I don't remember. So you can learn more about why that statement is true. Other free will beings can destroy the freedom for them, whether they recognize it or not. So other beings can come and destroy the freedom for other beings. The second type of beings, second group or individual can destroy for the first group or individual, whether the second group or individual recognizes what they're doing or not. It can still happen. You don't need to know what you're doing. The one who can recognize the state of freedom versus not freedom, what creates it, which is a moral behavior, and be able to choose what behavior they engage in based on that understanding, a higher consciousness beings, such as humans, are the ones who can align and not align with that dynamic of morality with the law of freedom. The law of freedom is an abstraction of reality that can't be easily understood by all free will beings. Understanding it requires a high enough level of consciousness capabilities. Reversing evil and restoring the default of true freedom requires these capabilities, as does the ability to organize with others on that shared understanding that they can develop. They can then unite and counter the imbalance created by other free wills who might have physical or other superiority that thus far prevents the actualization of freedom restoration. So that's if you're an individual, you got violated by someone who's stronger, or they have weapons, well, you're at a disadvantage. But if you come back with 100 people, well, it doesn't matter how strong they are, the 100 people can take care of justice, bring back justice for that injustice that the one person created. Karma and free will. Again, continuing what freedom is for free wills. Karma and free will. Wind can make a rock fall off a cliff. Free will can kick a rock off a cliff. The law of gravity is a physical law and doesn't require consciousness or free will to function. Free will is not a requirement to the law of gravity functioning. The law of freedom is a metaphysical law about freedom, which requires the metaphysical free will to be present for it to function. Free will beings can create actions that create negative consequences for themselves alone, which is not evil, or for others, which is evil. So if you create negative consequences for yourself, you're not violating someone's rights. But if you do it to another, you are, and that's what makes it evil. Enslavement is a consequence created by free will. We are collectively doing it to ourselves because we collectively accept it. Free will behavior that affects human interaction dynamics alone, like creating evil or slavery, requires free will to counter it. It's created by free will. It requires free will to counter it. So I'll get more into that. And here we go. The next sentence brings up another good point. Laws alone don't do it for us. Sorry, ain't happening. And our free will to apply direct, personal, negative karmic consequences, abbreviated as DPNKC. So direct, personal, negative karmic consequences is optional. To have direct, personal, negative karmic consequences applied to rebalance things and bring back justice, to bring justice for an injustice, that's optional because it requires free will. It's not automatic processes in the universe. It requires choice. It's not mandatory, necessary like a law. The law of freedom isn't making the negative karmic consequence of aggregate enslavement. We do that. But it is describing it as the necessary outcome for our condemnation of evil or immorality, for our support, for our acceptance, for our tolerating it. It is necessary. If we tolerate what's being done as immorality, then that aggregate enslavement as a negative karmic consequence is part of that formulation of the law of freedom, that equation of how reality functions. Because if you're not dealing with it, well, it's going to stay. And if they keep repeating it, well, it's going to keep repeating because you're not making it stop. So hence, that's the aggregate negative karmic consequence that we have. Free will versus laws. Absent free will, reality operates by true principles. With free will, falsity can be accepted, leading to the creation of false behaviors to make reality contain unreal, false elements that shouldn't be there. Non-free will processes don't introduce falsity, unreality into reality because they're all operating by law. And it's automatic. It's not choice. Free will agents can do that. They can introduce falsity and unreality into reality. Now, do I have an example here? Maybe not. Maybe it's later, but I'll just mention one. So the false behaviors are, well, you're going to do something immoral. You're going to violate someone's rights. And that's creating something false in reality that shouldn't be there. It's unreal because it shouldn't be there. What should be there, and I've talked about this 10, 11 years ago or something, in the presentation on consciousness and causality, consciousness and truth, and how there's things that are present in reality, the truth of the reality we live in, but then there's the truth of what should be. So what we have right now is slavery, but it's not what should be. So if the thing that should be here, which is living by moral truth, isn't here, well then what we have here is unreality within the reality. It's unreality in terms of it being false and not real. And you can check out Science of Morality, Natural Law of the Science of Morality, Part 4, Morality, where I go into this explaining how false, unreal, and true and real are related. I won't go into it here because it'll just hash things out beyond the scope of this presentation. So free will agents can do that. Reality itself doesn't take care of correcting the false behavior that we created. If it did, the false behavior would be created and we wouldn't be enslaved. The falsity we create is up to us to correct. Again, freedom is for free wills. The free will negatives, the evil that we create, can only be corrected by free will. It's not taken care of by an automatic process. It's not taken care of by karma. That, oh, the karma, that's your karma for something that happened in the past life. That's not how it works. We can keep on doing it to our detriment. So we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep tolerating it. And it's going to keep happening. And that's to our detriment. And we can choose the beneficial path. But we're not, because most people are ignorant. We can't do it on our own. The few of us who know. It takes a majority. It takes a quantity. The universe allows evil immorality to be created because it allows all actions. All actions are allowed according to the laws. It's all allowed. Immoral behavior is allowed. Evil is allowed. So it's not going to disallow something and then fix it for us when we create it. It requires free will to fix it. The universe allows evil immorality to be created because it allows all actions. Courage to act makes things happen, be they to create evil or good. So courage, you got to act. You got to have the courage to do it, whether it's to create evil or to create good. Since free will creates immorality, the direct negative karmic consequence for immorality also comes from free will. Free will has to choose what to create and how to respond to what others create. So we have to choose how we're going to create, moral or immoral, and the results that come about. And then we have to choose how we can respond to what others create, whether we're going to return a negative, or whether we're going to balance things back out, or just leave it one-sided and then live in that lopsided condition of enslavement. We are doing this to ourselves in the aggregate as a whole by collectively allowing immorality. If it was a law doing it to us, it would mean no one is responsible for their actions. That everything's going to get taken care of. It doesn't matter what you do. It's all going to work itself out. You know, you ever heard that? Right? The evil, the immoral, it's all going to work itself out. God will take care of it. Oh, karma will take care of it. There's so much nonsense belief that people use so that they can remain irresponsible, like little baby children who don't want to take on responsibility. So if a law was doing it to us, this negative aggregate condition of enslavement, if that was the law doing it to us, it would mean no one is responsible for their actions, and this implies not only a denial of responsibility upon the individual, but a denial of free will as well. The universe isn't doing it to us. We are collectively doing it to ourselves. Evil is winning. Oh, yes, it is. So is there some other aspect of the universe that brings negative consequences to those who create evil or immorality? Does it automatically bring back order and freedom? Yeah, is there some aspect of the universe that's doing that? If good automatically and necessarily wins, if things automatically and necessarily end up personally ordered, fair, balanced, and just, then evil wouldn't be winning. Free will wouldn't be required to deal with free will that creates evil or immorality. We wouldn't need to do anything to combat immorality, evil, slavery, etc. It would all work itself out. Immorality would be removed and true freedom would be present. But reality check, that's not how things work, because free will is required to deal with free will. But if you look at the present and past, you can clearly see that all evil or immorality doesn't autocorrect from some automatic universal process. Wrong behaviors and results from free will require free will to correct. Freedom is for free wills. Freedom requires free will for it to be present, destroyed, or restored. If we want true freedom to be restored, we have to get involved in making it happen. Not going to happen by itself, little boys and girls. Sorry. It's up to free will to set things right, not some other power to do it for us. Okay? It's not up to the aliens. It's not up to some demigod, some demiurge. It's not up to God. It's not up to some creative intelligence. Ain't fuck all going to do it for us. So it's not up to it's up to free will to set things right, not some other power to do it for us, to correct the immorality of free will that free will creates. Free will has to correct free will. I hope I'm hammering that in enough. There's a lot of repetition in this presentation from other slides. Free will reciprocity. Direct, personal, negative karmic consequence is an optional reciprocity from a free will being towards the originator that destroyed freedom. It's optional, not necessary, not mandatory. The direct personal negative karmic consequence upon someone getting paid back for what they did wrong isn't going to happen automatically. It takes free will to do it. That's why the world is in the condition that it's in. The universe isn't making bad things happen to violators. The universe isn't making the same action be done to you after you do it. Like, oh, you do bad, you're going to get bad in return. No. A free will is choosing to create that reciprocity or not. So that reciprocity, I went into this in part 4. Something, people have this idea, the law of attraction, or you deserve what you get because, well, that's coming back to you. The bad things you do will come back to you. No, that reciprocity is going to be created by free will choosing to create it or not. And right now we're in the or not phase of it's not happening. So the violators keep violating. And history shows this. Many get away with their misdeeds having no direct personal negative karmic consequence applied. Go look at history, you'll see. Direct personal negative karmic consequence reciprocity for immorality is willed. It's not a mandatory, necessary aspect of the universe like a law is. This applies at the individual as well as the aggregate level. One group or aggregation doing something immoral to another group or aggregation doesn't necessitate the same or different action or harm being returned to the first group. For example, if we are enslaving another group or species, and we must be enslaved by others in consequence. So this is the idea, right? If we're enslaving another group or species, then we must be enslaved by others in consequence. So allegedly a correspondence. That would mean a law necessitates such a result. That you enslave others, they're going to then you're going to be enslaved. Okay, that would mean a law necessitates it. If it has to happen, that means a law is doing it. Meaning the universe is denying free will to make, I mentioned that a few slides ago, that it's going to make another group come and enslave the other group because that first group is enslaving yet another group. Well, that's denying free will to others and making them enslave us. See the logic here? It doesn't make sense, that idea. It's a belief. When the direct personal negative karmic consequence is not willed into creation, however, then indirect negative karmic consequence is the automatic result, which is letting the initiation of harm persist. No laws end evil or slavery. Free will is a random component of existence in comparison to the deterministic or probabilistic quantum mechanics, which is probabilistic in quantum mechanics or probabilistic in other, like statistics. I just added that in there to give people an idea of... Anyways, I went into that part 1 or part 2 of the law of freedom. So free will, random component, comparison to deterministic or probabilistic, causal chain of everything else, where there is no choice for outcomes, operating within laws where specific conditions produce specific results. Free will has choice. Immoral behavior is a choice. No law necessitates a reciprocal, direct, personal, negative consequence for being immoral. The consequences are demonstrably applied by other free wills. Laws allow immoral actions. They don't automatically apply payback reciprocity for injustices as a teacher, for someone to directly, personally feel the negative karmic consequence and not repeat those actions. It's not going to say, oh, you're allowed to do it, and then I'm going to fix it for you. What it does allow is, like the example before, you punch someone, well, they're going to feel that K1 level, they're going to feel that pain. And then they punch you back, and then they punch you back 10 times. Well, you're going to feel it worse than they did, and then you're going to learn not to do it. So all that is basic physical causality. But that response for you receiving that balance return, that direct personal negative karmic consequence for your violation, that's a free will who's choosing to do that. And they could choose not to do it. So it doesn't get applied like the third law of motion of an equal and opposite reaction the moment you punch a wall and hurt your hand, which is what I just explained. There are no laws that will automatically end slavery for our existence. If there were, slavery would be ended already. It wouldn't even exist if it was being done automatically to correct things for us. Will or consciousness is the only thing that can create slavery, and the only thing that can restore true freedom by ending slavery. Period, the end. Look at the law of freedom. Back to presentation 1, look at them all. How does slavery get created? Immoral behavior. Only free will, consciousness can create immoral behavior at a certain level of consciousness. Only they can create immoral behavior, only they can create enslavement, and only they can deal with that enslavement to restore the default of true freedom. So you can bring up the example, well, an asteroid can destroy humanity, and that would end slavery. But that also ends freedom for humanity. So it doesn't apply to the goal of the emergence of true freedom, as humanity needs to exist for true freedom to be possible and for the law of freedom to apply. So that's a non sequitur. It's just bullshit. Holding on to the negative karma. There is a negative consequence, K1, already at the victim, and it stays there without free will sending it back, K2, the response. The free will, metaphysically created immorality requires the free will, metaphysically created response to bring the balance of justice, mat, for the imbalance of injustice. Free will to match free will. Morally writing, M2, if you know my Science of Natural Law, Part 4 morality presentation, that'll make sense. I'm not going to go into it, but it's just here for reference. Morally righting an immoral wrong is not done by automatic laws, but by free will choice. Free will choice is the driving force to create immorality and to deal with immorality. Laws determine what is allowed to happen, and it allows it to happen. We are collectively holding on to the negative karma because we aren't sending it back to the origin, completing the cycle, the 1-to-1 ratio, the balance. The imbalance is created by violators, but we let them repeat it to persist the enslaved condition. They keep doing it because we let them. So I talked about this briefly in the part 4 previous presentation on the law of freedom. So we're holding on to that negative karma. It's just going one way from the violator, boom, to the violated. We're getting violated. And then we're just holding on to that. Oh, well, thank you for that negative karma. We're not going to create negative karma for you to make you stop. No, we're just holding on to it as a majority, as the overall quantity of people on this planet. The sowers of evil are getting paid. Oh yeah, getting that payback, boy. Watch out. The sowers of evil get a return. They get a payback. They reap what they sow. But not necessarily in the negative for negative personal payback sense that we're normally talking about when we're talking about people getting karma, that they're getting paid back a negative for having created a negative. That's not really what's happening so much. They sow violence, and the return many or most of them get is getting what they wanted. Or literally being paid money for doing it, such as the police, the military, politicians, banksters, etc. They're creating falsity into reality. They're creating fraud, deception, and they're getting paid for it. And some of them are getting paid for physical violence and higher violations of property rights that individuals have. And some are paid non-monetarily, so they're getting what they wanted, even if they're not getting paid. So in getting what they want by having control over others. So these could be like the hidden hand, who's behind the scenes. Maybe they're not at the top echelons of monetary power, and some are, but maybe they're like, they could be a normal job, but they're behind the scenes calling the shots, and they're getting what they want. A system of control and enslavement that they're at the top echelons above all the other ones that we see at the Bilderberg and whatever groups of influence and power and control. Some people could be even behind that, above that, and they're not making tons of money, but they're getting what they want, which is the control, total control, and increasing it, and getting what they want, which is just that control and creating a hell on earth in various degrees. Those who immorally control others are parasites of society, politicians, etc. They don't really do anything. They just leech off of other people's labor and get paid, and they don't produce anything of significant value, any value whatsoever, actually. So those who immorally control others are parasites of society, coercing their way to self-benefit, which is contrary to being a beneficial or non-detrimental contributor to the aggregate way of life we all co-create. The predator mindset they have is given to others in a diluted form, so that others accept and want what their masters want as a way of life for all. Everyone is allowing evil to reign, allowing immorality to be done to them. That's what we, the majority, sow, and we're reaping that bitter harvest. So the part that we're sowing is we're just allowing it all to happen. And that's what we're reaping, a bitter harvest. While the other ones, the sowers of evil, it's not so bitter because they're getting something out of it that they want. Who is responsible? Is enslavement being done to us? Yes. Others are exerting control to enslave covertly. They create that control. And if they didn't, it wouldn't be there as a problem. But what is the expectation when some try to exert control or theft over the rightful property of others? To just let them? Is that what really is expected? Is that really what is expected when there's control and theft and immorality over the rightful property of others? Is that, it's just to let them? Yeah, that's the expectation when people do that. Yeah, we'll just let them, go right ahead. Well, that's nonsense. We have to respond to deny that attempt to control or enslave. Send back karma to bring back balance. if we don't do anything, inaction, then the violators can repeat immorality, and we continue to let them repeat it. We are part of the process of our collective enslavement by letting it happen. We get collective, impersonal, universal justice of all individuals getting what they collectively deserve for the inactions of the majority via the principle of the majority or the principle of quantity. It's fair at the aggregate scale because overall everyone is doing it. That's our collective karma. But it's not fair at the personal scale, since many individuals work against the evil that the majority support. They are bound by the actions of others that make them suffer the personal injustice of being enslaved by the collective. Moral justice to stop the repeat injustices is not an automatic necessity of law in the universe. It has to be willed into creation. That's the end of the presentation. I thank you for your time and attention. My name is Kris Nelson. My site is evolvedconsciousness.org. And I guess I'll see you next time when I do part 6 of the Law of Freedom. Thank you again. Take care. Peace.